Welcome back to the Last Days Book Club. Everybody loves stories of angels, and that is what we bring to you today. Our new book is called It Must Have Been an Angel by Marjorie Lewis Lloyd. It is a collection of true stories related by persons who had angelic encounters to the author and to other individuals. It also has other providential tales of divine intervention compiled from various Christian publications. Like other books we have shared in the book club, this book is designed to build our faith as we endure these last days of Earth's history. It is very comforting to know that angels who excel in strength, hearken unto the commandments of God, and dwell in His divine presence, are truly ministers unto men and women who are the heirs to salvation. It is even more assuring to know that they exist, not only to be our guardian and recording angels, but to provide evidence that all of heaven is interested in the affairs of men and seriously concerned for our well-being and salvation. It is the prayer of SWM's Last Days Book Club that these angel stories will build your faith, encourage you in your walk with God, and always to love your neighbor as yourself, since you never know when you might be entertaining angels unawares. We begin with chapter 1, which has the same title as the book. It Must Have Been an Angel. The corner of Broadway and 42nd Street in New York City is one of the busiest in the world. But one day, a cat threaded her way along the sidewalk and came up to the curb. She was holding a baby kitten in her mouth by the back of the neck, as cats do. She wanted to cross the street, but she was confused and frightened by the roar of trucks and buses and cabs. Several times, she stepped cautiously off the curb and then came back. It was just too dangerous. And then, something happened. The traffic officer saw her. Immediately, he put up his hands and stopped the traffic both ways, because of course, he couldn't know which way the cat wanted to go. Now, when a traffic officer lifts his hand, it isn't a request. There's power behind it. Instantly, all traffic stood still. The cat saw her chance and darted across with her little one to safety. And then the rush and the roar resumed. The cat never knew that she was the object of special care. She never knew that a hand had been lifted especially for her, and that back of that hand was all the authority of the city of New York. We too never know how often a hand is lifted for us with all the authority of heaven back of it. We are reluctant to think that God could be interested, even aware of the needs of a single individual, especially of one on a tiny, seemingly insignificant planet such as ours. We hesitate to speak of angel hands being lifted in our behalf, even if we have been told that we are worth more than sparrows. We speak of coincidence and good fortune, and some of us even call it luck. Yet, down through the centuries, angels have walked beside the children of men, comforting, guiding, encouraging, delivering from danger. Most of the time, they have stayed in the shadows, only occasionally darting across our field of vision, dazzling us with their brightness, bringing us some message from the throne. But in all times and in all lands, including our own, they have left the indelible marks of their presence and their care. And we interrupt our wonder to exclaim with conviction, if not with proof, it must have been an angel. The story of the magnificent ministry of angels, those patient celestial beings assigned to us on planet Earth, has never been fully told, nor will it ever be. But we can begin. It was a sleepy, snowy day in a winter that had already been far too long. It was 1964, and it was Friday. The snow that had been falling for 2 days finally did let up, and Lowell Thomas Jr. left for the airport. As an Alaska state senator, he had business in Fairbanks. His wife, Tay, and the children, Ann, 8, and David, 6, waved goodbye and closed the door quickly because it was still below freezing outside. At about 5 o'clock, because Ann had a headache, they went upstairs to rest and watch TV, and they took off their shoes so they could sit on the beds. About half an hour later, Tay heard a rumbling sound. She had often heard guns firing at a nearby army base, but this was not the rumbling of guns. She shouted, "Earthquake!" and jumped off the bed, grabbing Anne and calling to David across the hall. They had reached the front door when the house began to shake, and as they ran out into the snow, David was crying, "Mommy, I'm in bare feet." The earth was jolting back and forth with unbelievable force, and they were flung violently to the ground. The hallway they had just run through split in two. They heard the sounds of crashing glass and splintering wood. A tree crashed to the ground. Their garage collapsed. Tay Thomas describes what happened. She says the earth began breaking up and buckling all about them. Suddenly, between her and Anne, a great crack opened in the snow. She stared in disbelief as the trench widened, apparently bottomless, separating her from her child. She grabbed the hand Anne reached out to her and was able to pull her across the chasm. They were left, she says, on a wildly bucking slab of earth. Suddenly, it tilted sharply, and they had to hang on to keep from slipping into a yawning crevasse. The earth seemed to be rising just ahead of them. She had the weird feeling that they were riding backward on a monstrous Ferris wheel, going down, down toward the water. Their house had stood on a high bluff overlooking Cook Inlet, but now the entire face of the bluff had fallen to sea level. A few feet away, at the water's edge, lay the roof of their house. I'm using her words to describe it. She says all she could think of was that the water would rise as the earth tumbled into it, and they would be trapped. The cliffs above them were sheer, with great sections of sand and clay still falling. They had to find a way up that cliff, but the children were too frightened to walk. They kept crying, "We'll die! We'll die!" In that desperate situation, she looked up at the sky and silently cried out, Jesus, where are you? I thought you'd be with us at the end." And suddenly, she felt a tremendous peace. She knew that he was with her, not up in the sky somewhere, but right beside her. At that moment, a man appeared above them. They called for help, and he shouted that he would look for a rope. Then 6 or 8 men appeared at the top of the cliff. One of them, a stranger, climbed down. The children threw their arms around him. He took off his black wool jacket, put it around Anne, boosted David into his arms, and led them all back up along the rope. At the top of the cliff, Tay Thomas turned to thank their rescuer. He had disappeared. They were never able to learn his identity. Had God sent an angel in answer to a trusting prayer? Was 8-year-old Anne wearing a jacket that belonged to an angel? We cannot know for sure, but there is a familiar pattern here, and of one thing we can be certain: it's the sort of kindness that angels like to do. From a pen dipped in inspiration, we read, "Not until the providences of God are seen in the light of eternity shall we understand what we owe to the care and interposition of His angels. But we worship a God who doesn't want to wait. He shares a few of His secrets even now." The end of chapter 1. Chapter 2. Now you see them. Pastor Merritt Warren had not been in China long when he made this particular trip. Like most every other journey he would take in that country, it was full of danger, heading through a robber-infested area. He had been traveling several days when he was delayed one afternoon by a stranger who invited him to his home. He had learned that Pastor Warren was a Seventh-day Adventist minister and wanted to ask questions about his belief. Pastor Warren, of course, was glad for the opportunity to talk with one who showed such interest. He thought he had plenty of time. The coolies with the boxes had gone on. The village of Chin Tai Pu was only 5 miles away. He could easily ride that distance before dark. As he was leaving, however, his host told him that it was nearly 3 times that far. He warned him that it was not safe to travel in that region after dark. Hastily, he mounted his horse and hurried over the low hills. Just at dark, he reached a small village along the way. He hoped that the carriers would be waiting there, but he learned that they had gone on up the mountain. What could he do? The carriers had his food and his bedding, and he must pay for their lodging wherever they stopped. He knew now that he was in danger. The coolies had his lantern too, and he would have to have a lantern. So he bought a Chinese paper lantern, and the shopkeeper lighted it for him. But in a little while, as he walked ahead, leading his horse down the slippery stones of the mountain, the candle sputtered and went out. He started to light another, but then he said to himself, "Now look here. You can see better with the lantern, but so can the robbers. If they are following you, the light will help them more than it will help you." So he trudged on, hoping the robbers wouldn't hear the clank of the horse's shoes on the stone steps. At the bottom of the mountain, he came to a bridge made of stone slabs. He couldn't see what he was crossing. It might be a stream or a chasm. He could see only the dim trail and the bridge. Beyond the bridge, the trail turned to the right and began another ascent. About 150 feet from the bridge, to his right, Pastor Warren saw a house and a light burning inside. The house was about 50 feet long and seemed to front on the road. A door in the center opened as he arrived, and two men came out. Pastor Warren had a good excuse for stopping, for he was alone and without a light. Speaking in the humble manner used by the Chinese, he said politely, "May your younger brother borrow a light from his older brother?" "I shall be glad to give my brother a light," one of the men answered. He stepped inside and returned with a piece of flaming bamboo. When the candle in the lantern had been lighted, one of the men asked, "Where were you going?" "To Chin Tai Pu." "I am traveling that way myself." "I shall be honored to have my older brother lead me," Pastor Warren answered. They started off together, talking as they traveled. Merritt asked questions, but he was careful not to say anything that would sound as if he were trying to identify him. If the man were a robber, the situation would be dangerous. Finally, the man said, "There are many robbers through this section, and they are robbing all the time. No one is really safe on this road. I am glad I could come along with you." That was strange. The man wore ordinary clothes, the rice straw sandals of the common peasant. Why would a robber try to rob him? And why was this stranger happy to have a foreigner with him? Soon they came to a place where a path branched off. The Chinese said, "I must leave you here." "Aren't you going to Chin Tai Pu?" "No, I'm turning off here." "How much farther is it to Chin Tai Pu?" "Not very far. You will be there right away. I'm glad I could walk with you." When Merritt arrived in the village, he found the people worried about his safety. They told of many travelers who had been robbed, and some had been killed. The young missionary had reason to be thankful, very thankful. The next time he traveled that way, he was anxious to see by daylight the places where he had walked that dark night. It was all just as he remembered it. The shop where he had bought the lantern, the climb up the mountain, the stone steps down the other side, the ravine with the stone slabs for crossing. As he started up the slope, he looked for the house. No house was there. Had the house burned down? It has to be here. It was a large house, and it stood right here. But as he examined that slope, he saw that the ground had never been leveled at any place along the road. It would have been impossible to build a house without leveling a large piece of ground. But there was no level ground. The hillside had never been disturbed. No wonder he stood silently with bowed head. He knew now that an angel had walked with him that dark night. Says an inspired writer, "We need to understand better than we do the mission of angels. It would be well to remember that every true child of God has the cooperation of heavenly beings. Invisible armies of light and power attend the meek and lowly ones who believe and claim the promises of God." And from the same pen, we read, "Not until the providences of God are seen in the light of eternity shall we understand what we owe to the care and interposition of his angels. Celestial beings have taken an active part in the affairs of men. They have appeared in garments that shone as the lightning. They have come as men in the garb of wayfarers. They have accepted the hospitalities of human homes. They have acted as guides to benighted travelers. Angels as guides? Yes, again and again. Charlotte, many years ago, was a student at Pacific Union College. At the insistence of the Dean of Women, she had memorized the words, "The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivereth them." Psalms 34 and verse 7. But little did she realize how soon she would need the assurance of these words. To help with expenses, Charlotte traveled twice a week by bus, some distance from the campus, to a town where she worked for a fine family who paid her generously. All went well until one night, tired and not watching carefully, she boarded the wrong bus, one bound for San Francisco. There she was, in the big city, alone and surrounded by strangers. She had no idea, in that huge terminal, how to find a bus that would take her back the way she had come. There was not a single woman on the loading platform. A drunk was trying to make conversation. The information booth was closed for the night. Not a policeman was in sight. And bus drivers were too busy even to hear her timid question. What should she do? She was frightened and confused. Then, like a flash, she remembered the words she had memorized, the words the dean had told her she would need some day. "The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and delivereth them." Finding a restroom, she went in and locked the door. Then she fell to her knees and prayed, "Dear Lord, I'm tired and lost. I'm afraid. I don't know anyone here. Please help me find my way home. According to thy word, deliver me. Amen." Then she stepped out into the main area of the terminal again. Just at that moment, a young man passed in front of her, and she noticed immediately that he was carrying what appeared to be a large black Bible. A Bible? Could it be that he was a student returning to Pacific Union College? At least he must be a good man, a man with a Bible. She followed him. He led her along several long corridors to another part of the terminal, and finally up a flight of stairs to a remote loading platform. She never could have found her way. And there it was, a bus ready to pull out, with big letters on the front, ANGWIN. Now, right at this point, it is necessary either to discard the story as false or accept it as a miracle. For anyone at all familiar with Pacific Union College knows that no bus, unless it were a chartered bus, would ever pull out of the San Francisco terminal with Angwin, ANGWIN, on the front. It would likely be necessary to change buses in Vallejo, or even if a bus should go directly to St. Helena, it would not be negotiating the tight curves up the hill to Angwin. So the story becomes incredible, which according to the Random House Dictionary means so extraordinary as to seem impossible. Yet, should we limit God or question the ability of an angel to write 6 letters on the front of a bus even if it was not going all the way to that destination? But back to Charlotte. She followed the young man with the Bible onto the bus. There was only one seat left, but the young man stopped as if to speak to the driver and let her pass. She took the seat, amazed and thankful, and continued to stare at the young man, whose back was turned. And then something strange happened. The bus driver didn't seem to see the young man at all. He turned and got off the bus, but no one paid any attention. Only Charlotte continued to watch him intently. She followed his form a few feet in her steady vision, and then, with her eyes fixed upon him, he simply vanished, like a light going out. Was he an angel, guiding a tired, lost girl? You decide. A mother and daughter, with 2 St. Bernards, were traveling through Arkansas when a news bulletin came over the radio. Due to the extensive flooding in southern Tennessee and Missouri, the bridge in Crithersville, Missouri has been washed out. We suggest you take the Browns Ferry crossing instead. But where was Browns Ferry? A gas station attendant gave them directions, and they drove off into the approaching darkness. Were the directions accurate? And were they following them correctly? Again and again, they had reason to wonder. In the wind and the rain and the mud, they seemed to be driving straight into the isolation of nowhere. Debbie was crying. What if they were lost? Even the St. Bernards seemed to know that something was wrong. Deb, said Mother, I'm not very religious, but maybe we ought to pray. At least we'll be ready if something does happen. Okay, replied Debbie, you pray. I can't, I'm driving. Do you want to go off the levee? The car slowed as Debbie prayed, and somehow they felt better. And there was another consolation. Volkswagens were supposed to float for half an hour. Finally, they came to a place where the road ahead was flooded. Mother stepped out of the car to see how deep the water was. She could see a strong current on ahead. She had gone about 40 feet, turned back, and was almost to the car when another set of headlights appeared from nowhere. The car stopped. There seemed to be a man inside. We're trying to get to Brown's Ferry, she told him. Well, he drawled with a long pause, I can get you all across this flooded area here, and the ferry is just up the road a piece. And he added, you be sure to follow closely now. And of course she did. Slowly and cautiously, she followed the cream-colored car with the current tugging demandingly. Once across the troubled waters, she pulled up beside the man. Thank you so much, she said gratefully. That's quite all right. Just keep on going about 2 or 3 more miles, and you'll come to the ferry. Thanking him again, she pulled away slowly. But looking into the rearview mirror, she could see no headlights, no car, no houses, nothing. Look back there. There's no one there, she nearly shouted at Debbie. Debbie looked back into the blackness. You're right. They have acted as guides to benighted travelers. Remember? Isaac Nearbago has reason to remember. In his own words, he tells what happened as he was trying to introduce Jesus to the people of his own village in the highlands of New Guinea. One day, I left place where I stay and go to another place to visit people. When I was there visiting people, the rain came and the flood came, and I have no way to cross the floody river. And I kneeled down just on the bank of the river and asked the Lord to make my way. When I opened my eyes, the man was stand beside me and said, "Where do you want to go?" The man said, "If you want to go to the other side of the river, you just follow me." I follow, and man take me to the other side of the river, and we stand together, and I turn my face away from the man, and when I turn back, I no see him anymore. That's what the Lord had done to me. Says a writer whose words can be trusted. The Bible shows us God in his high and holy place, not in a state of inactivity, not in silence and solitude, but surrounded by 10,000 times 10,000 and thousands of holy beings, all waiting to do his will. Through these messengers, he is in active communication with every part of his dominion. By his Spirit, he's everywhere present. Through the agency of his Spirit and his angels, he ministers to the children of men. Above the distractions of the earth, he sits enthroned. All things are open to his divine survey. And from his great and calm eternity, he orders that which his providence sees best. Angels, assigned to us on planet Earth. Sometimes we see them. Most of the time, we don't. But never are we beyond the reach of their untiring care. The end of chapter 2. Chapter 3. Now you don't. Hazel Jackson believes in angels. She and her husband were returning from a vacation in Death Valley. They had just reached the top of a mountain when her husband discovered that they had no brakes. Their hearts seemed to stop. They were driving a heavy car and pulling a travel trailer, and already they were gaining speed down the mountain. On one side was an abrupt drop lined with huge boulders all the way to the bottom. On the other, it was straight up. No brakes. Accelerating speed. Death stalking them on either side. All they could do was pray. Down the mountain, faster and faster they went, careening, it seemed, towards certain death. But suddenly, for no visible reason, the car skidded to a stop. Her husband dashed out of the car and blocked the wheels with large rocks. And there on the mountain, they thanked God for sparing their lives. And they marveled at how he had done it. But they still had a problem. How to get down off the mountain with no brakes. Just then, a service car from the station 7 miles down in the valley pulled up alongside. The driver said he had received a call that someone on the mountain was in trouble. They told him they certainly were in trouble, but they had made no call. There was no phone anywhere around. They waited while the driver checked the entire mountain, trying to discover who had called for help. He found no one else on the entire mountain and returned to assist the Jacksons. Who made that phone call? Who stopped the car in its wild ride? Do we have to see an angel to know that one is around? Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Psalm 91, verses 9 through 12. But who are angels? Are they the spirits of men and women who have died, as some believe? No. Angels were present when this world was created. And angels were assigned to guard the gate of the Garden of Eden as soon as Adam and Eve had sinned and been evicted from their garden home. How could they be the spirits of those who had died when no one had died yet? It was David who said, "What is man, that thou art mindful of him, and the Son of Man, that thou visiteth him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hath crowned him with glory and honor." Psalm 8, verses 4 and 5. A little lower than the angels. Evidently, angels and men are separate and distinct. Created to inhabit heaven, they are a little higher order than man. But angels, ever since man sinned and direct communication with the Creator was broken, have been given a very special assignment. Are they not all ministering spirits, sent forth to minister for them who shall be the heirs of salvation? Hebrews chapter 1 and verse 14. Angels are commissioned to help and protect us. And Jesus indicated that an angel, a special angel, is assigned to each individual. For he said, "Take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. For I say unto you, that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father, which is in heaven." Matthew chapter 18 and verse 10. Are angels simply doing their duty? Or are they genuinely interested in us? Evidently, they are. For Jesus said, "I say unto you, that likewise joy shall be in heaven over one sinner that repenteth, more than over 99 just persons which need no repentance." Luke chapter 15 and verse 7. Angels turn up repeatedly in the Bible record. An angel was sent to Daniel in the den of lions. An angel rescued Peter from prison. An angel prepared food for Elijah. An angel stayed the hand of Abraham when he was about to take the life of his son. Angels led Lot, his wife and 2 daughters out of Sodom just before the fire and brimstone. But how much are the angels able to do for us? Are they really able to protect us? How much power do they have? Let me answer it in this way. On one occasion, God's people were threatened by the Assyrian army, and God sent a single angel, just one angel, through the enemy camp one night. In the morning, 185,000 soldiers were dead. Evidently, there is no lack of power. If angels are hindered in doing what they sincerely want to do for us, it is because they are restrained by God's wisdom or by man's free choice. Angels cannot be expected to protect us from dangers that we deliberately choose. But why, you wonder? Why is it that angels so seldom make themselves visible to men? Why do they keep in the background? Why don't they come out in the open and let us see what they're doing for us? I don't pretend to know the full answer, but we might find a clue in the experience of the Apostle John on the island of Patmos as he was being given the book of Revelation. And I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said unto me, See thou do it not. I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Revelation 19 and verse 10. And it happened again. And I, John, saw these things and heard them. And when I had heard and seen, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel which showed me these things. Then saith he unto me, See thou do it not, for I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren the prophets, and of them which keep the sayings of this book. Worship God. Revelation chapter 22, verses 8 and 9. Would we not be tempted, as John was tempted, to worship an angel who revealed his presence to us? Could this be one reason why angels so seldom make their presence known? Of one thing I am certain. Angels are anxious that the focus of attention should not be upon themselves, but upon the Lord Jesus. They want to stay in the background. They want Christ to have the throne. Even so, we can know that angels are with us. We can have their companionship, and we can know that we have their full support in every attempt to lift up Jesus before a fallen world. Harry Shrillo, a dedicated layman who loved his Lord, also loved to sing his praise. I'm told that he had a beautiful voice, and he used it for more than song. Let me share with you one little glimpse of his experience in working for his Lord. I was studying the Bible with a fine young couple. They were sincere in their desire to learn, but they did not accept everything without question. They often brought up objections that must be met. On one particular evening, the subject scheduled was one that Harry thought might be difficult for them to accept. He expressed his concern to his wife, Florence, and suggested that they pray about it. They went into the bedroom, knelt in prayer, and he left for his appointment. That evening, to his surprise, everything he presented was accepted without question. The truth he presented from the scriptures met with no resistance whatsoever. He never knew why it had been so different that evening, except that he and Florence had prayed especially about it. It was several years later, after Harry died, I believe, that the wife in that home told Ruth Grunke, a friend of the Shrillos, what had happened. She said that when she went to the door to let Harry in, there was a halo of light about his head. And that halo of light remained through the entire study. His face seemed unusually happy and shining. Somehow, everything seemed clear to them. And with such an evidence of divine approval, how could they resist the truth that was presented? Florence Shrillo tells me that a similar light surrounded Harry once as he studied with another couple. All who engage in ministry are God's helping hand, we are told. They are co-workers with the angels. Rather, they are the human agencies through whom the angels accomplish their mission. Angels speak through their voices and work by their hands, and the human workers, cooperating with heavenly agencies, have the benefit of their education and experience. In the future life, we read from the same pen, every redeemed one will understand the ministry of angels in his own life. The angel who was his guardian from his earliest moment, the angel who watched his steps and covered his head in the day of peril, the angel who was with him in the valley of the shadow of death, who marked his resting place, who was the first to greet him in the resurrection morning. What will it be to hold converse with him and to learn the history of divine interposition in the individual life of heavenly cooperation in every work for humanity? And those who, like Harry Shrillo, have walked and worked with angels unawares will see the result of their labor. Alice Zarate was new in the literature ministry when it happened. Magazine workers in the Philippines usually make their calls 2 by 2. But on this particular day, it was necessary for her to work alone, and for that reason, she prayed especially for both guidance and protection. She was working in an area where the people were quite prejudiced against the type of work she was doing. As she approached a large house, she was met at the door by 2 large German police dogs, followed by their owner. The owner seemed surprised that the dogs were so silent and calm, and she invited Alice in. So far, the story is not unusual. But imagine, if you can, how Alice felt when the lady of the house placed 2 chairs instead of 1, as if for 2 visitors. More than that, the lady addressed the second chair as if someone were sitting there. And Alice seemed to hear a quiet voice talking with the lady about the magazine. Apparently, whoever was in that second chair excused herself, and the lady accompanied her to the door. Then she remarked to Alice that her companion looked quite becoming in white. She asked about her religion, and Alice told her she was a Seventh-day Adventist. She wanted to tell her hostess that she really was working alone, but under the circumstances, it just didn't seem appropriate. The visitor in white must have returned, for the lady of the house now invited them both to stay for lunch. She set 2 places for her visitors, and when Alice stole a glance at the other place setting, she saw that half the glass of milk was gone, and half the slice of bread. As Alice left the home, the owner placed a friendly hand on her shoulder, and it appeared that the other hand was placed on the shoulder of a person at her side. Alice never did see her companion, but she remembered these words found in Gospel Workers, page 515. Those who labor for the good of others are working in union with the heavenly angels. They have their constant companionship, their unceasing ministry. The end of chapter 3 of It Must Have Been an Angel.